All right, so now it's time to actually take a look at our data and start scaling ad sets that are within our KPIs and killing off ad sets that are not in our KPIs. So the first thing that we need to do is, again, just quickly review what the KPIs are, what the KPIs that we've determined we need to hit are for this funnel. And so obviously, as we've mentioned, this is a webinar funnel, and so the funnel looks roughly like this. We have an ad that drives traffic to a landing page that gets people to register for a webinar, that gets people to go to a sales page and purchase Facebook ads for agency owners. Now, there's 3 price points for Facebook ads for agency owners. One's at $1,000, one's at $2,000, and one is at it was either $3,000 or $4,000. Most people ended up opting in for the VIP program, which is $2,000, and so for the sake of this, I'm just going to say that my average order value is around $2,000. And typically for a funnel like this, I'm looking for a minimum 2x ROI, which means that I'm willing to pay $1,000 to acquire a customer. So I'm willing to pay $1,000 to make $2,000 in revenue. That's a 2x return on ad spend. So if we look at this funnel, we have the click, we have the registration, and we have the sale. So we have click, registration, and sale. If I'm willing to pay $1,000 for the sale, and I know that a baseline benchmark for a webinar's conversion rate to cold traffic is right around 1%. That means that I am willing to pay $1,000 per sale times a 0.01 or a 1% conversion rate, which means I am willing to pay $10 roughly per webinar registrant. Right? Because if I'm paying $10 per webinar registrant and 1% of my webinar registrants actually purchase, then that means that I'm paying $1,000 to get 100 webinar registrants, and one of them is going to purchase, which means I'm paying $1,000 per purchase, which is still within my $2,000 my 2x ROI KPI on a cost to acquire a customer basis. Now, I know that most landing pages convert at around 20%. I fully expect this landing page to convert at right at 20%. And so if I'm willing to pay $10 per webinar registrant and 20% of the people who hit this landing page actually register for the webinar, that means that I'm willing to spend $10 times 0.2, means I'm willing to spend $2 per click. So I'm willing to spend $2 per click. And assuming this landing page converts at 20%, $2 per click will get me to a $10 average cost per webinar registrant, which, assuming this webinar converts at 1%, will get me to a $1,000 cost to acquire a customer, which will be within my 2x ROI, assuming my average order value is at $2,000. Now, these are a lot of assumptions because this funnel has never been tested to cold traffic before, but typically these in my experience are pretty solid baseline benchmarks to go off of. And when you're just starting out, if you're starting in a brand new industry, you don't have any prior data to work from, then you just have to sort of make educated guesses and go from there. Now, obviously over time, as I track these metrics, I'm going to be able to see, okay, well, right now my cost per click is way out of KPI, but my cost per lead is actually within KPI, which tells me that my landing page so far is actually converting at greater than 20%. Now, I don't have any sales yet, but I also only have 16 leads, and so if I expect my webinar is converting at 1%, that means that I wouldn't even expect to have a single sale until I've had 100 webinar registrants, and realistically, just due to statistical significance and variance, I probably would not start to worry until I have like 200 leads go through this webinar and not a single sale. That would make me start to reconsider whether or not my webinar is actually converting at 1% or not. And so again, $2 cost per click, $10 webinar registrant and $1,000 sale. Those are sort of our KPIs. And so as we dive into our actual ad sets and we start optimizing and killing ad sets that are outside of our KPIs and scaling up those that are, we're going to keep these numbers here in mind, and we're going to be looking for things that are outside of KPIs. So the first thing that we're going to do when we go in here and dive into these is we're going to look at the previous 7 days. Now these ads have only been running for 3 days, which is the minimum amount of time you want to let your ad sets run before you start making any decisions. That's part of the reason why you always want to launch at such a relatively low budget, because they need to run for a few days, and if you're at a high budget, you can blow through a lot of money on ads that you're going to kill anyways. So anytime you're making optimization decisions, you always want to be looking on a last 7 days basis. If you look at like a 1 day basis, if you look at just yesterday, for example, there's variance in your results. And so at any given day, your ad performance is probably going to look like this, right? Like any given day, actually, that's probably a poor example. Your ad performance is probably going to look like this. And so any given day, your ad performance could be down or up, just depending on the day when you look at it. But over a longer horizon, you should see your ad performance moving up and to the right, assuming you're following the optimization and scaling strategies that I teach in this program. And so if you were to only look at an ad set on a 1 day basis, that means that you could view the ad when its performance is down here, and you could make the decision to kill it when the reality is, it was just a down day. It was just a bad variance day. And over time, this ad has been performing very, very well, and you'd want to keep that alive. And so it's important to look at your ads on a 7 day basis at a minimum. Typically, I look at my ads on like a 7 and sometimes even a 30-day basis. So I've got my ad data reporting here pulled in over the last 7 days. And so now I'm going to start drilling down into these campaigns to actually start killing ad sets. And so the very first one that I'm going to take a look at, just taking a look at this this cost per webinar registrant. Obviously, the campaign that's the most out of KPI is my interest campaign, which does not surprise me because, as we know, interest audiences are typically the least value audiences that you can create. So I'm going to drill down into this. Before I do, though, you'll probably notice one thing, and that is that my leads and cost per lead here are different than here. This is because I know that this data is 100% accurate because it's from my backend. So I know that this number of leads is 100% accurate because I pulled it out of my CRM. This data will never be as accurate as your CRM, but it's going to be directionally accurate, which means maybe Facebook's over-reporting, maybe it's under-reporting, but it's likely over-reporting and under-reporting by the same amount throughout each campaign. And so even though this number absolutely is not right, like obviously 12 is not the same as 16, it's directionally correct. And so I would expect that even though I may have had more or less actual registrants come from these interest campaigns, I would expect that the interest campaigns are in fact 3x more expensive than my lookalike campaigns have been. And so even though I don't rely on these numbers as absolute numbers, I rely on them to be directionally correct to make my optimization decisions. And so as a result, that's why I'm looking at these numbers in the ad platform to make optimization decisions, even though I don't actually report on those numbers. I report from my CRM for my reporting for myself and for clients. So that was just a slight tangent. So let's drill into the interest campaign, since this is our worst performing campaign. $25 per webinar registrant is well outside of our KPI. And so we can click into that, and this will pull up all of the interest and the interest audiences that we have launched. And so we can see here that in each of these campaigns we've spent over $10, some of them $13, some of them $12, but we've spent over $10. We've spent more than our KPI is to get a registrant. And so at this point we can start making decisions to kill campaigns. So for example, this job titles audience that, if you remember, I was a little bit hesitant about. I was curious to see how it did. We've spent $12 and haven't gotten a single click from that audience, and so there's just zero chance that this audience is going to work for us. So we're going to go ahead and kill that right now by simply just turning it off. In this one, this one is a little bit more interesting. This audience here, the Marketing SaaS 1 audience. So we spent $13 and gotten 1 click, but we also got 1 registrant from that click, which is interesting. And we actually also received a sales page view from that. And so for this one, I'm going to let this one run a couple days. Again, this is sort of the part where it becomes part art, part science. And so, yes, obviously a $13 cost per click is well out of our KPI of a $2 cost per click. But at the end of the day, all I care about is my cost to acquire a customer. And so it's possible that these customers, or this traffic, is actually much more qualified than anyone else. Had someone from this, had the single person who clicked and also registered, also viewed my sales page, which is more than anyone from any of these other campaigns has done yet. And ultimately, if this audience is just more qualified, then they're likely going to be more expensive on the front end. But as long as I'm acquiring a customer for less than $1,000, that's all I care about. And so just due to this and what's happening on the back end, the fact that the one person who actually registered also viewed my sales page in less than 3 days, I'm going to keep this one live for a couple more days. Now, in 2 days, if I've spent $30 and I still only have 1 webinar registrant, then I'm going to kill it. But for now, because it's early, because this is a pretty small sample size, I'm going to leave this one running. Now for this one, again, I've spent $4 at a $3.36 cost per click, and I've had no registrants. The fact that I've had no registrants from this isn't concerning because, again, 4 clicks, that's not a sample size at all. And so I'm actually going to leave this one running for now. I'm not going to scale it, but I'm just going to leave it running. This, I've had 1 click at $12, no registrants, no nothing. I'm going to kill that. And let's see. I've got 2 link clicks at $6. Yep, I'm going to get rid of that as well. This is a little bit more interesting. I've had 2 link clicks here, but 2 registrants at a cost per registrant of $6, which the clicks are out of KPI, but the registrants are well within KPI. And that, again, that's all we care about, right? Is just that we are within KPI down the funnel. And so what I'm actually going to do is I am going to scale all of these by $5 a day just to get some more data. Because again, like if we're making decisions on a couple clicks, that's a poor way to make decisions. Typically you want, between 30 clicks before you start making any decisions. However, just due to how expensive these clicks were, I'm killing them off the bat. But in my opinion, it would be a mistake to kill these prematurely. So I'm just going to increase these to both of these to $10 per day, and start getting some more data that way. And so typically, and I believe we've covered this in a previous video, but when you're starting off, typically I double the daily budget until I get up to about $50 per day, and then after about $50 per day, I start scaling by between 10 to 25% per day. Typically, I don't scale an ad set more than once every 3 days because, again, it takes 3 days for the Facebook algorithm to actually re-optimize and resettle and dial itself back in. So I'm going to go ahead and set each of these to $10 per day. And you can see it says that it's publishing up here. Great, so these are my interest campaigns. I only have 3 interest audiences still alive, and who knows if in a few days if they'll still be alive. Again, interest audiences are almost always the least profitable campaign. So let's go back and let's check out our lookalike campaigns now. As we can see here, our cost per webinar registrant for our lookalike campaigns is already more promising, and so this should be a little bit more interesting to adjust for. So we can look here. We have 3 lookalike audiences. We have a 1 to 3% lookalike built off of our email list, a 1% lookalike, and a 3 to 5% lookalike, all based off of our email list. Now this is interesting. Typically, I would expect the 1% email list audience to perform better. However, again, we're slightly out of KPI here, but 3 link clicks is not at all a good sample size. I mean, we could have just gotten unlucky and 3 poorly qualified people could have clicked on our ads, and then the next 10 will actually click and register. So again, typically I don't like making decisions with less than 30 link clicks. And so for these 2 campaigns here, because this one is very close to within KPI and this one is very much within KPI on a cost per webinar registrant basis, I'm going to go ahead and double these. The fact that we've spent $12 and haven't gotten a single click on this one, I'm going to go ahead and kill this ad set here, and I'm going to scale our remaining 2 to $10 per day a piece. Oops, that's the one that's turned off. So we're going to scale these and we're just going to see what happens, because another thing that's worth noting is as you scale budgets, Facebook has a hard time optimizing when with a very small daily budget. And so as you scale and you get up, past $50 to $300, even up to $500 per day per ad set, Facebook really can do a better job of optimizing on your behalf. And so if you're seeing promising results, like the fact that we have any registrants from as few as 6 clicks is very, very promising. Typically, as long as it's somewhat close to KPI, you want to go ahead and scale it. Again, this is not an exact science. This is an art. And so what we're doing is we're just scaling things that show some promise. We're going to watch it for a few more days, and if results get worse, then we're just going to kill it. If results get better, then we're going to keep scaling. It's a very simple process. And so the last campaign that we're going to check is we're going to take a look at our retargeting campaigns. Now, obviously, the retargeting campaign, this audience is a single audience consisting of everyone on my email list and all of my website visitors. Obviously, I would expect this audience to perform the best, and obviously we're not going to be able to scale this one as much. And as you can see, the results are very clear that this audience is performing the best because everyone in this audience already knows who I am. So we're getting link clicks at $1.24, and we've had 5 webinar registrants at $2.49, and so it's a pretty no-brain decision. I'm going to go ahead and scale this to $10 per day. I mean, realistically, with the size of this audience, I would be doubtful that I'll be able to scale this past $25 a day, just because we have it's a small audience size unavailable because it's probably so small. It's less than 10,000 people for sure. And so I'm going to scale this to $10 per day. That might be about as high as we're able to scale it until we start to see our cost per clicks increase and our cost per webinar registrants increase, because we're burning out that audience due to the fact that there's no one else to show these ads to. And so this is my process for how to scale a campaign from scratch, how to evaluate which ad sets aren't performing, kill the ones that aren't, scale the ones that are, and now in 48 to 72 more hours, we're going to come back and take a look at the additional performance and keep scaling and killing as necessary, and ultimately just keep going from there. Now, if we go back to our paid traffic reporting sheet, we're going to keep reporting on this on a daily basis. And again, I would not expect to see any sales until I've spent $1,000. Typically, assuming you're fairly confident in your funnel and your traffic, typically you don't want to hit the panic button and think about trying anything until you spend up to 3x what you're willing to spend just due to statistical variance. And so really, I wouldn't think about, like, I would only start to get concerned about this funnel or about the traffic if I spend $2,000 and haven't received a single sale yet. And then if I spent, up to $3,000 and haven't hit a single sale, then I would look at reevaluating the entire funnel. I would drill down into the specific areas. I'm like, okay, am I hitting my cost per clicks? Am I hitting my webinar registrant KPIs? If so, that means there's something wrong with the webinar. Maybe I need to go and re-record a webinar, hold another one, something like that. Which we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves there, but that's just important to note. Like, the fact that I have 16 leads and no sales is not concerning to me in the slightest, because I've already stated in my KPIs that I'm willing to spend up to $1,000 to acquire a sale, which means I've spent about a tenth of that. This is a very common mistake that I see new people make. They're like, I've got 26 clicks and not a single lead or not a single purchase. Like, that is completely normal. You need to just do the math and trust the data, which is why it's so important that we track this on a daily basis so that we see what our actual math is, we see what the data is, and we make decisions based on the data, not based on our emotions. I'll see you in the next video.